Be with you today. I was blessed to have worked with Dr. King, to have traveled with him, to been in his pulpit as a speaker, to have stayed in his home, to work on his staff, be with him in Memphis when he breathed his last breath. I'm acutely aware of, sensitive to the power of this God-sent man. Today we honor the liberated spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, one that was an inclusive, universal spirit, rooted deeply in the Black experience of overcoming suffering to achieve. He believed that suffering breeds character. The character breeds faith, and the end faith will not disappoint, faith will prevail. On this past Monday, there was a dynamic historical moment when the observance of Dr. King's national holiday and President Obama's second inauguration converged on the same day. It was both historical and poetic. There, President Obama put his hand on Dr. King's Bible. About 170 miles from Jamestown, Virginia, the first slave ship landed in 1619. He stood on the steps built by enslaved ancestors. Looking beyond the Washington Monument, where even Washington willed his slaves to be freed upon his death. Looking in the distance at the Lincoln Monument, where Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation 150 years ago this year. Between those two monuments is now the monument of Dr. King, a challenge to America to fulfill the unfinished business of the broken promises of 1863 and 1865. He believed that, and I believe now, that when young America comes alive with hope and vitality, you can push the nation forward, resisting paralysis by fear and the status quo. Let me ask you a series of questions now as to where you are. This is so basic to me for us to get a sense of where each other is. If you have a student loan, please stand.
What did he say?
You have a student loan.
If you have a student loan, please stand. Be seated.
Holy shit. That's a lot.
If you're on student aid, please stand. If you're on student aid. This is a state university. Everybody here is on student aid. Stand. If you know a classmate who has tried drugs, please stand.
Okay. If you know a classmate that's used drugs.
Be seated. If you have a friend in your age group who is in jail, please stand.
I'm never going to sit down.
Be seated. If you know someone who has been shot or brought a gun to school, please stand. Brought a gun to school, please stand.
Oh, God.
Be seated. Lastly, if you know someone who has considered suicide, please stand. Amen. These questions are not liberal, not conservative. They are common. America is a liberal idea. The idea, give me your tithe, you pull your home asses who yearn to breathe free. The right to free speech, the right to free worship. America is a liberal idea. In a land so blessed, we are too stressed, too gripped by fear. America owns 300 million guns. 32,000 Americans kill each other a year. 100,000 more injured who do not die. While we're the most blessed nation on earth, fear has made us one of the most violent nations on earth. There's simply too much poverty amid plenty, too much separation from racial and religious walls that separate us horizontally, the vertical walls that separate us into radical class polarization. There's too much war, ignorance, and fear, which drives divisive hatred and violence. We as a great nation must not destroy paradise. We're turning the promise of hope into chaos. Fear and violence are undermining the promise. We love what we should hate. drugs, violence, and guns. We hate who we should love, each other.
Amen.
We should not allow the beauty of the skin complexion to become a badge of shame or ugliness to stand between us and the kingdom. Growing up in his theological training, Dr. King felt that through some combination of politics, love, power, and justice, a keen sense of history, and understanding Rhino Niebuhr's nature and destiny of man, we could become more secure. We often refer to Dr. King rather glibly in remembering the I Have a Dream speech. First, Dr. King had a keen sense of commitment to intellectual pursuits for the goodness of our minds and spirits. When he was 14, he wrote a paper on the Negro and the Constitution, a serious subject. He finished high school at age 15, in college at 19. He finished seminary at 22 and earned a PhD at 26. He believed that people have a personal obligation to not self-destruct through drugs and loose behavior. People should not self-degrade, that no matter how much destructive forces want to degrade you, don't submit. You should not internalize self-degradation. We should pursue academic development with a passion. We speak of I Have a Dream speech today. Remember it rooted deep in history. The dream was a conclusion we have yet to reach. We're still on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. 100 years later, he said, America has broken the promise made in 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation. Through the 13th Amendment, abolished slavery in 1865, the Negro today, from Texas across to Florida. Up to Maryland, we cannot use a single public toilet.
What?
Our money is counterfeited. We cannot buy ice cream at Howard Johnson's. There were the hotels at Holiday Inn. 100 years later, here we stand. The dream was a literary, poetic climax. He helped knock down walls. The rocks from those walls built the foundation of the bridges that President Obama ran across in 2008 and 2012. But the king was hit with the sledgehammer of injustice. Hit on the head with a brick in Chicago, battered, stabbed, jailed, resented, and hated. Paid the ultimate sacrifice to bring down the walls. To enable us to have today's bridges. Dr. King was point simply was, America, I refuse to believe that you cannot honor the promise. President Obama's address was, America, we must fulfill the promise. Both speeches was rooted deep in the Declaration of Independence. The one, Big Ten America, everybody in, nobody out. In America, even when we play the playing field, you can go from disgrace to amazing grace. You go from log cabin to White House in America at its best. The crippled child can dream beyond the state of infirmity. From the bloodshed on the bridge of Selma, Alabama, to the coal miners in Appalachia, to Native Americans, reservations, to ghettos and barrios, to the All-Americans, we believe in one blood. Not royal blood for some, but royal blood for all of us are God's children. All of us are royal in the sight of God and must have royal opportunity. We've learned to survive apart. Now we must learn an even greater lesson, learning how to live together. We learn to survive apart. With walls separating us. Now we must learn an even greater lesson, learning how to live together. How marvelous it is in the world when we see each other through a door and not a keyhole. Take these walls of race and religion and of language and other physical boundaries of ignorance, fear and hatred, violence, and move them, let them come down. When the walls come down, we see each other in real time, in a real way. The South, when the walls came down, we connected Mason and Dixon. The price whites in the South paid for keeping black and brown people down was to stay down with us. The South could not grow. When the walls came down, a new South emerged. You could not have had the Atlanta Falcons behind the old walls of the South. You could not have had the Dallas Cowboys, Texas Rangers behind the old walls in the South. You couldn't have had the Olympics in Atlanta behind the old walls of the South. Utah could not have played Alabama behind the old walls of the South. You could not have had auto industry, global and cosmic development behind the walls of the Old South. Jimmy Carter could not have come from Plains, Georgia to the White House. Not Bill Clinton from Hoboken, Arkansas. Not George Bush from Odessa, Texas. Could not have been president behind the old wall. When walls come down, the sun was able to shine. When all of us let the walls come down. After winning the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King was invited to meet with Lyndon Johnson at the White House. Said to President Johnson, "Give us the ballot. We bring forth a new America." President Johnson said, "You know, I hear you, Dr. King. You need the right to vote, but I cannot grant it to you unilaterally. Bad news, Congress can, but they will not give you the vote, so you can't vote. If you do get the vote, the South will shift and change parties. It will be a different country. Somewhere between the blood on the bridge in Selma and the walk to Montgomery, Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act August 6, 1965. When he did, Jefferson, Davis, Democrats. George Wallace and others became Reagan States Rights Republicans. Lincoln Republicans became Lyndon Johnson Democrats. Race drove a fundamental shift in the makeup of both parties. I was blessed to be with Dr. King on his last birthday, as we seek to celebrate his birthday every year around the country. And his day of, what did he do in his day of service? That morning he had breakfast at 8 with his family at home. He'd been all over the church around 10 o'clock that morning. He came in his windbreaker jacket and blue jeans and a sports shirt. He'd been blacks from the deep South, whites and Jewish allies from New York, Latinos, Native Americans, willing to engage in civil disobedience in Washington, to go to Washington and fight back to end poverty at home and the war abroad. He wanted to shift the priorities from killing abroad and fighting the war in Vietnam to fight the war on poverty at home. He was disgusted we chose to end the war on poverty at home. I was glad that day as a student. I just left jails of Greensville, South Carolina, and Greensboro, North Carolina. Returned jail cells in the classrooms, and dungeons into places of dignity. The day we stood in Washington, King said that from Texas to Florida, up to Maryland, I say to you, people of color couldn't use a single public toilet. How disgraceful. Our money was counterfeited. Our dignity was stripped from us, but we kept on fighting back. I was with him in Memphis when he was shot April 4th. We had a staff meeting on the Saturday before in his office. He was disappointed. He was despondent. Said he had had a migraine headache for 3 days. He said, as I fight to end the war, to expand our vision, we're meeting great resistance. He said, nobody seemed to understand me. I was against violence in Alabama when whites bombed my house, my wife and child inside. I resisted black retaliation at that time. I was against violence in the streets of our cities. I'm against violence in Vietnam. You can't reconcile a bloated military budget with the need for houses and health care and education. He went through 3 moves. You see, first he said, I thought about quitting. Maybe I have done as much as I can do. In 13 years, we won great victories. We won the battle to get from the back of the bus. Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65. Maybe I should quit. I've done the best I could do. It's number 2, maybe if I would fast until death, those strategic disagreements will come around my bedside and we can agree on the larger issues. And the young said, Dr. King, don't talk that way. Doc said, and don't say peace when there is no peace. Then all of a sudden, he was overcome by a spirit and said, we can turn the mountains into a plus and go forward. Let's go on to Memphis and keep fighting back. As I took copious notes, he reminded me of Jesus going through the 3 moves. Let this cup pass from me. Praying as disciples slept, and then thy will be done. Out of the roots of this faith, Dr. King is now the great prophet and transformer of America. You must seize the world anew, elementary school to college, and let nothing break your spirit. Life is full of choices, and consequences. You must choose future over funerals, life over death, hope over despair. We are a blessed nation. We're just 6% of the human race. Russian Republic is 6%. Together we're about 1/8% of the human race. The 7/8 will no longer be dictated to by us. Half of all human beings are Asian. 1/8 African, 1/4 Nigerian. Most people in the real world today are connected by science and technology, iPods and iPads in real time. English is a minority language in our hemisphere. Learn more than one language. Most people in that world are yellow, brown, black, non-Christian, poor, female, young, and those speak English is a great language, but Jesus did not speak it. 10 Commandments were not written in it. In this world, we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters or perish apart as fools.